Hot girls, we up. So the American dream is dead. The American dream is actually a nightmare. And baby, wake me up. Matter of fact, I've risen. I wanted to take a second to discuss what the American dream is for a lot of immigrant families, the impact that has on a lot of first generation and especially eldest children, and ultimately how, in my opinion, it truly isn't a dream, it's a nightmare. And now that I'm older and I have a little bit more agency in my own life and I've given myself the permission to ask myself, what does my dream look like? It's not the American dream. Before I get started, hi, my name is Sol. Welcome to Los Archivos de Sol. Yes, we've done a little switch up. Before I get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I think it's really cool to see a community being built in real time. I'm like, oh my God, wait, we have 10 subscribers. How cute. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you for being here. As I've said time and time again, this is a space for us to learn, unlearn, and grow together. And so for this conversation, it's going to be a little bit of a rant, a little bit of me just sharing a little bit more of my personal experience in the hopes that if it resonates with somebody, then, you feel a little less isolated as you're navigating this part of life. So first of all, what is the American dream? When I think about what the American dream means for my family and what the American dream means for a lot of families that are back in the homeland, the American dream looks a lot like Hollywood. It looks a lot like home ownership. It looks a lot like car ownership. It looks a lot like individualism and showing the world that despite everything, you manage to somehow, some way make it. And as somebody who has watched my family assimilate in many ways to American culture because that's what kept them safe, I also, the older I get, the more I realize, are y'all really in a dream or is this a nightmare? I grew up in the projects. More specifically, I grew up in the Jordan Downs and Watts. Like, listen, whenever I get a chance to be like, I'm from Watts, I am from Watts. Do I have LA tatted on my arm? So am I from LA till I die? Yes. But LA is big. And if there's one thing that if you're from LA, dependent on where in LA you grew up in, it informs so much of who you are. And so Watts itself was such a beautiful community to be raised in for many reasons. Was it dangerous? Yeah, I'm not gonna come up here and sugarcoat that we weren't watching drive-bys happen, that somebody didn't literally die in front of my apartment, somebody died in front of my grandma's apartment because of gun violence. Like, I'm not somebody who's going to negate that there's a lot of violence that has happened in our community. But and also, I'm not going to be ignorant of the fact that a lot of that violence has been inflicted because of the police surveillance, police state that has been affecting and deeply penetrated in Watts for not only years, but decades. But having grown up in Watts in like the early 2000s into the late 2010s, I think that at that time, because there wasn't so much technological dependency, we were very much depending on community. I grew up with my mom being a single mom for a majority of my life. So we had a babysitter who was my neighbor. I grew up playing with the kids in the neighborhood. I grew up being really well connected with the kids that I grew up with and I went to school with. And that's what community felt like. That's what it felt like to be a part of a place. And then as time went on, and again, then we started seeing things like my mom buying a house, us buying new cars, us da 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 da. Yes, it seemed to present to the world like, wow, look, they made it. But then I would watch how much sacrifice had to be made in the background, how many sleepless nights had to happen for this to happen, how much women who are still very much young have debilitated their body so much because of the stress that they put on themselves in this chase for the American dream. Because we arrived in the United States while my mom had come pregnant with me, and they were very much escaping a lot of the violence that they had endured because of the civil war in El Salvador. In many ways, I felt this deep sense of obligation of doing what they expected of me and meeting all of these like metrics of success that they had put on me for them to also feel like I was part of their American dream. Let me go to college, let me get a degree, let me get a good job, let me get my own apartment, let me get a car. Did it, baby, miserable. Am I grateful that I was able to go to undergrad? Absolutely. Was it a difficult journey? Yeah, watch my video on pivoting for more information on my undergraduate journey. But it wasn't easy. It was really hard. I had many sleepless nights myself, many nights where I was crying, many nights where I genuinely wondered if it was both attainable and worth it. And still, I persisted and I pushed through because in the back of my head, I always heard the voice of my mom and my grandma telling me that going to school was my only job. Going to school was my only job. Well, I was working. One thing that Latino parents love to do is minimize how much work we actually do because they climb mountains to go to school. And that will always be the thing we hear. But, like there was a lot of sacrifice that I myself had to make in order to put myself in a position where I could make it to undergrad and finish undergrad as well. And once I did, like, I'm very lucky and I'm very blessed that I was able to land a job that has given me a lot of comfort and has given me a lot of privilege. But at the same time, it hasn't been easy to work at this job. There's been many times where I ask myself, how much more am I willing to try to assimilate into corporate America just for the quote unquote comfort that working in this place gives me? And again, like all of these different things have all happened and have all been built, not because I was giving myself the permission to be in the driver's seat and dream, but because I was going off of what their dreams were, what their aspirations were, and what they thought was the American dream. And why I say that it's actually a nightmare is because, again, I see how when I was a kid, I would go back to El Salvador for like a month in the summers. And having had that exposure really young made me deeply aware of how culturally different the United States was from El Salvador, where El Salvador was a community that was deeply dependent on the people that you were with, on the people in your pueblo, and the people in your canton, whatever it may be. I saw firsthand how intimate the relationships were in El Salvador. In many ways, too fucking intimate. Get out of my business. But there was a level of care and consideration and sacrifice that was being willing to be made by the people who were all coexisting in these communities. Whereas here in the United States, it almost feels like if you need something, you're a burden. And we see that because houselessness is criminalized, poverty is criminalized, suffering is criminalized. So I feel like here in America, we actually chase this, I could do it on my own, I got it on my own, da, 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 da. And then what does that lead? So many health complications and health ailments, so much isolation, so much secrecy of pain that's had to happen in order for these things to be able to be attained and like reached. If you ask me, that doesn't sound like a dream. That sounds like a nightmare. And that's why I say, like, I've woken up because, with all due respect, since I was the first born in the United States, that meant that I had access to citizenship, which then gave me a social security number, which then gave me a passport, which then gave me the ability to move across the United States as a person who was documented. And I watched my family solely for the fact that they had arrived before I was born there and they were not born there. They had to navigate a lot of the early 2000s undocumented. So because of that, for them, hearing me say, I don't have a desire to make roots in the United States, I don't have a desire to buy a home in the United States, I don't have a desire to have kids in the United States, for them, it blows their mind, because why would I not want that? That's what they wanted themselves their whole life. That's what they sought out their whole life. That's what they sacrificed their entire life for. So how dare I be so ungrateful to not want to be a part of their American dream? But again, like when you remove the cloud, you remove the rose colored lenses, and you ask yourself, what does your dream look like? That's not my dream. Please wake me up. Double it and give it to the next person. Respectfully. I can't do it. I can't do it. And so I think the older I'm getting, the more I'm giving myself permission to ask myself if I don't see myself setting roots in a place, not only because it seems highly individualistic, but then also it's a country that is very dependent on you being economically liberated. And to be economically liberated, you have to then reach a certain level of making money or wealth. And then that gets taxed at an insane rate. And for what? To then fund an American hegemony that is going around exterminating people and has been exterminating people for centuries. I don't care to be a part of that. And I remember when I was telling my grandma about the history of El Salvador and the Civil War, and how the United States had a big hand in the Civil War happening there, and the conditions that both led to the Civil War to happen, but then also afterwards led for the country to not be able to heal after so much pain that had happened in the 80s and the 90s. I remember her saying, es que si venimos a vivir a la boca del lobo, va. And I was like, yeah, we literally are in the mouth of the wolf. The same oppressor that made it so that we had to come here is now oppressing us here. And so today, as we're seeing ICE terrorizing our community, police being in support of the terrorization that's happening, institutions being fortified in a way where it sustains this sort of violence towards our community, I don't care to be a part of it. And I actually, again, have become deeply aware of the fact that it's not an American dream, it's a nightmare. And I don't want that for myself. I want my family to wake up from this nightmare. And I don't know if I'll be able to see that in this lifetime, but I do know that it's a gift and a joy that I myself have the accessibility to question that for myself. And so while I don't necessarily know that, leaving America is going to solve a lot of the feelings that I have about why I don't see what they desire as a dream, but instead as a nightmare, I do know that I would be doing a huge disservice to myself if I continue to live somebody else's dream rather than giving myself the permission to dream a life for myself. And so I don't know. It's so hard to not feel like, what am I doing? And at the same time, I tell myself from when I was in the womb, I was giving myself the permission through my mom to migrate. And so now that I'm in a season of grieving these versions of myself that I know no longer serve me, and I'm stepping into allowing myself to be reborn into who I want to be for this next chapter, I don't really care to do it in America. I don't. Wow. So I don't know if somebody else is feeling this way, know that like obviously being able to move isn't as easy and accessible for everybody. And being able to leave a place doesn't have to be as exaggerated as maybe like leaving outside of America or whatever, but give yourself the permission to process for yourself. Are you actually dreaming or are you allowing yourself to continue to live in a nightmare? I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer it for you, but I can answer it for myself. And I know that again, for me, when I think of what the American dream is, mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Anyway, I'm gonna try to end this just like on a note of gratitude because at the end of the day, I think while I have a lot of admiration for the American hegemony, I also have to give immense gratitude to my family for having done what they could to build community when they arrived here, to support the people around them, to still be able to find joy even in moments where this country was doing everything in their power to strip them away of not only joy, but the bare ability to exist. And while America isn't perfect and it isn't pretty, having grown up in the Jordan Downs again, I wouldn't be who I am today without it. And so I don't have resentment towards America. I'm very grateful for it making me into who I am today. The fucking American hater. I just, it's a mess. It's a mess. While it's inflicted a lot of pain, it also has given me the ability to understand very intimately that there are so many communities that are fighting for liberation. There are so many communities that will continue to fight for liberation in America. And at the end of the day, the world is deeply interconnected. And so what happens in America affects the rest of the world. What happens in the world affects America. And so while I don't know that I myself want to be physically in America, for this next chapter of my life, I do know that at the end of the day, whatever sort of liberatory work I'm doing, not only for myself, but for those around me, is with the ultimate goal of us being freed from what is hegemony and imperialism and colonialism and classism and colorism and the patriarchy. Like all of these fucking isms, they're all interconnected. While they're deeply seated in so many of our institutions in our just like day-to-day life, that doesn't mean that we can't take the time to deconstruct it where we can and how we can. And a part of my deconstruction has been asking myself, do I actually want to live in America? No. Anyways, made it this far. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hearing me rant. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And the next time we chat, I hope to have a little bit of an update as to like what's going on with me. I'm currently in Europe. I'm figuring out what my immigration situation is going to be here. And again, I don't have any craving or desire to go back anytime soon, but I'm still very deeply tied because I still have loved ones there. I'm still doing what I can to use my privilege how I can to help people there. And I'll continue to do that. And I don't have to be there to do that. And maybe you don't either. Okay. Anyways, yeah, have a great night.